Hey guys, DMS3TV here. Today I have with me the Audio Technica M40X. Now a lot of people have been asking me to do this headphone for a while, or something in the series for a while, and here they finally are. And I do have a lot to say about these, not all what you might expect, so let's get right into it. As always, I want to start off with the build. While there isn't a ton to say about the build on these, I will say it's about what I would expect for a headphone in this price range. These are $100 in most places online. And I mean, sometimes you can find them cheaper on sale. I've seen some for like 70, around like that, but generally I see them average about $100. They're all plastic. They obviously have quite a bit of mobility. They can turn here, they can fold up. Obviously they click out and expand just like any other pair of headphones can. So you can adjust them to your fit. And that being said, they do seal pretty well because of their mobility and how they can move around. But I will say the build feels a little bit lacking. But I mean, then again, like I said, it's a $100 set of headphones. I'm not gonna try and be really hard on them because of that. And comparing to other things, you know, I feel like these feel better than the SHP 9500s did. Honestly, these feel better than the K7XXs did, as far as if I felt like, I feel like if I dropped these, they would survive. I'm not sure the K7XXs would survive a drop. On the subject of that, they did come with a soft case, which, I mean, that's not gonna do too much besides protect it from scratches, and several cables. One, which is very, very long. There you are. Which is 3.5 on one end, which you can put on a screw-on adapter to make 1/4 inch, and the other end, which is 2.5. Now this is a recessed connector that actually has to go up into the headphone, so you're not gonna be able to just take these and connect them up to, you know, any old 2.5. You'll have to find one that's actually compatible with this. I meant to test and see if it was compatible with the same ones as the 5.98 since those are recessed, but I never actually had a chance to check it out. But these do twist lock, so you put it in just like that. You twist it and you see these two little white lines match up, and that's how you know it is locked in, it's not gonna pull out. So downside of that being that, you know, if you step on the cable and expect this to just pull right out of the headphone as a safety, that's probably not gonna happen. You're probably gonna end up like maybe damaging your cable, hopefully not damaging your headphones. That specific case, I feel like these wires are probably cheap to replace. I'll look it up and I'll put a price on the screen if I can find it online. But at least you are getting a removable wire on these headphones. I feel like all headphones should have that. I was extremely disappointed in the Fostex THX00 Purple Hearts that for their price they didn't have a detachable cable. And these things, which are only $100, do have a detachable cable, so good on them for that. You can tell that the owner of these was using them as probably like a gaming headset or something like that, because there's obviously a little stick-on piece here for a mod mic, which is pretty neat. And I've heard they can be decent for that. And based off how they sound, I could see them being decent for gaming in some situations. So, I mean, we'll get to that at some point. But along with build comes comfort. And these are pretty easy to pad swap. A lot of the pads I tried felt a little bit loose on them just because of the size of this. So I tried HM5 pads, like the hybrids. I tried Alpha pads, I tried ZMF pads, and they all fit just a little bit loose on here. They didn't quite get super tight. But they did all, you know, relatively fit. The HM5s didn't fit as well as the others did. I think the ZMFs and the Alphas definitely fit the best out of those. And they fit a lot better if I, instead of putting them inside this ridge, if I actually tried to wrap them all the way around the outside. Sound-wise, I feel like in some areas it helped and in some areas it hurt. I feel like you definitely do need pads on these. These aren't the worst stock pads I've ever felt, but I mean, I put a pilot pad on these and I tried to put other pads on when I was testing them simply because the comfort was not great. I mean, it's not the worst, like I said. And these would certainly work for monitoring headphones, which is what I think one of their main intended uses is as monitoring headphones. But for a long listening session, the stock pads and headband definitely are not up to par. Once again, still good for the price. I'm not complaining about that for a $100 set of headphones. I'm just saying in general, I feel like that's, you know, it could be better. With that being said, let's move on to the sound. Now, these are slightly V-shaped. They're not super V-shaped, but they are slightly V-shaped. It's not the same kind of V-shape that I had on the Purple Hearts that were here, or the same kind of V-shape that I had on the X2s that were here, where they kind of had like those spikes in the high end, and then just like a mid-bass bump at the low end. This is actually a V-shaped headphone that I found to be somewhat enjoyable, because I'm not a big fan of V-shaped headphones, but I did wear these and I didn't find myself disapproving of the sound. It wasn't, you know, distorted, it wasn't grainy. And that actually is something I can really appreciate for a headphone in this price range, is that they didn't sound like they were particularly lacking in transparency. So the thing about these is that they have decent bass, especially if you put pads on them. They have decent treble, it's reasonably transparent, you know, it's nothing mind-blowing, it's nothing phenomenal, but it is very good for what I would expect out of a headphone in this price range. But they are boring. It sounds weird, but they are a boring V-shaped headphone. I know that sounds so strange out there, but it sounds like they're a little bit lifeless. Now, that being said, they are analytical, and I mean, I could definitely sit down and use these. I used them as my daily driver while I was testing them. You know, I didn't feel like I was being forced to use them or anything like that. And these can be driven off a phone. I mean, you can drive them off a phone, a laptop, an amp, whatever. They're very easy to drive, but I will say they really were kind of boring. And, you know, that's not always a bad thing. That's really just a sound signature thing. I mean, soundstage wasn't particularly bad. It wasn't particularly impressive either. They were decent for closed back cans. They were better than any of the Bose ones that I tried that costed way more than this. Honestly, you know, I like these more than the SHP 9500s, things like that. I think it would be a relatively difficult choice if you were trying to pick between these and the 598C, the closed version. Just kind of based off what sound preference you like. I think the 598C is a more well-rounded headphone. I think they had better soundstage. I think they were more comfortable overall. Obviously, that's also a bigger headphone. They have, you know, better pads. They're more expensive. But sonically, I think that this and the 598C would come a little bit closer. So for me, that's kind of what that price bracket would kind of come between. For closed back cans is between the 598C and these, because the 598C often go on sale on Amazon for around $100. So, I mean, personally, I do prefer the 598C, but this definitely comes close. And I think if you have a set of these, while they're not really, you know, while they're not super killer, they're not gonna blow anybody out of the water, they're not gonna amaze anyone, they're reasonable for the price. And I can't knock them for that. So while I don't feel like they're game-changing in any way, and while I don't feel like they're anything super special, they're reasonably well-rounded and they're affordable. So with that in mind, and with their faults in mind, I'm gonna say that I think that these are actually a relatively decent pair of headphones. I came into this rather skeptical. I had heard a few sets in the past, and M50X was, I'm not a big fan of those. But M40's not bad. I'll give them that. So if you're looking at something for $100 or less that's not particularly mind-blowing and has a little bit of a V-shape to it, and of course you'll want to invest probably in better pads if you plan on doing long listening sessions, these wouldn't be a bad choice. Do I feel like there's a better option out there? Yes. But I couldn't really give somebody crap for getting a set of these. So anyway guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. By the time this video goes up, I will have passed 3,000 subscribers, so that is super, super awesome. We are growing like, we are growing way faster than I ever thought we could have. It's really cool. So make sure you guys stick around. As I probably mentioned in my last video, I am releasing videos early to everyone on my Patreon, so check that out. I have a link in the video description, and I will see you guys next time in a speaker review. Oh, and leave me a comment below letting me know how you guys feel about me doing some producing stuff. I've been thinking about kind of bringing some of my producing, like music producing, onto the channel. So, you know, things along the line of like me teaching people how to mix and master, how compressors work, things like that. And I'm also gonna be doing a series on what audiophile terms mean. Like, you know, it's like soundstage, dark, warm, you know, bright, etc. So stick around for that. Peace.